what we're going to be talking about is the executive budget, the proposed budget. We're going to look at that budget. We have a report. It's very good, detailed analysis of the budget. Takes a very complicated issue of the state education budget, puts it in pretty straightforward analysis. It looks at the distribution of the $805 million that's proposed to be added as restorations from the last 2 years of cuts. It looks at what would happen if you reprogram the competitive grant money, the $250 million, how much every single district in the state would get in addition. The entire report with all the data sets is in your packet. Electronic versions of it are available on our website now. Where this is one of 7 such press events happening across the state at this moment of time. The others are in Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Binghamton, Mount Vernon, and Wyandanch. Come on up front. Just come on around here this way. Come on. Jesse, why don't you come up to it? And we're just being joined by Emily Mania, who's a parent from Troy, School 16. So let me go ahead and get in. Is everybody ready?
Yeah, we think so.
Okay, excellent. That's what I say every year about this time. First off, what we did is look at a lot of discussion this year has been on the distribution of the funding. The Regents said that 73% of the funds should go to high-need districts. This is the actual distribution of the $805 million, okay? 52% of it goes to high-need districts in the executive budget. 14% goes to average need districts. 31% goes into competitive grants. Okay, that's not allocated to any district at this point in time. We don't know who's going to get that money, but as far as the actual distribution of the $805 million, that's what it actually is. What we have then behind this, and all these are in the print copy you have of the report as well as the electronic version. Because $555 million of this is allocated to go to school districts at this time, that would restore only 1 out of $5 that have been cut from the classrooms over the last 2 years. $2.7 billion in cuts, that's 1 in $5. I'm going to go through our whole report in a minute, but I did want to just hit these highlights first. So a first step would be to reprogram the $250 million out of the competitive grants and into school aid. First, we would say that, just as the Board of Regents has said, take $53 million of that funding and put it into pre-K. Then put the rest, this is based on the same formula that the governor used in his budget proposal. If you then distributed that, you'd end up with 71% instead of 52 going to high need districts, 19 instead of 14 going to average need districts, 7% going to pre-K. Even the wealthier districts would also see a slight bump up from getting 2% of the total to 3%. So this is, again, to just compare these two graphs, you can readily see that this would only give 52% of that money to high need districts, whereas this one would give 71%. The impact of all this in terms of the classroom and in terms of the impact of the funding is that this would restore 1 out of $5 that's been cut the last 2 years. This would bring it to 1 out of 4. Still not enough, frankly, okay? It's going to be, even at that point, hard for districts not to make more cuts because of the double impact of inflation and the tax cap. So we have these issues. I'm going to walk you through the report, and then we'll hear from our speakers who actually have examples of the impact of the cuts. So on the right side, on the left side of your package is the release. On the right side of the package is the report, No One Wins When Our Children Lose. And Marina Marcoux O'Malley, right here, Marina is our policy analyst who's the author of the report. You can see it starts on the front page with the quote from Dr. John King, the Commissioner of Education, that school districts are facing potentially educational insolvency. That's because school district cannot go bankrupt. There's no legal mechanisms for a school district to go bankrupt. If they run out of money, their only choice is to cut the quality of education. And that's what we're seeing. You know, we have our major findings on the inside. We'll be highlighting them throughout. The main ones are some of the ones we've already covered. Our basic recommendations are: one, that the $250 million on page 2, the $250 million in the competitive grants be reprogrammed to classroom restorations. This is only a restoration of a portion of the last 2 years of cuts. That $53 million of that competitive grant money be contributed directly to pre-kindergarten programs. Pre-kindergarten programs are incredibly successful. They increase student outcomes, increase graduation from college as well as high school, increase people's income when they become adults, reduce incarceration rates. It's not something we should have to compete in order to have. In addition, we need more funding than the $805 million for classroom restorations. It's not enough to hold the line, much less, it's definitely not enough to restore some of the programs. And then we have a set of cost-saving recommendations that we're highlighting as part of this. As you go through the report, you'll see on the next 2 pages we have examples of, on page 3, of some of the things that have been lost in districts. We'll be hearing some of those stories. But on page 4, it's very interesting because with all this talk about money not mattering, if you look at what we have in we have some of the finest school districts in the entire country and the entire world in this state. And those districts are districts with wealthy communities that are producing 95% graduation rates, 90% of those students then going on to college or university. And we're not saying take from them. We're saying we should protect everybody's quality. But if we look at what they have in places like Scarsdale, Rye, Chappaqua, or Jericho, we can see the quality is fantastic. We also see there's a pattern. Many of the things that contribute to that quality are actually similar to some of the things that are them being cut in schools. So across the state, we've seen cuts in advanced placement, arts, music, sports, electives that create a broad curriculum. We've seen cuts in career courses. If you look at just one of these, you know, we could look at Scarsdale, where they offer 15 advanced placement courses, 6 college and SAT preparation courses in addition to that, 21 art classes, 28 performing arts classes, 4 foreign languages, 21 sports teams, and an intensive college preparatory program for all 9th and 12th graders. It includes annual college guidance counseling, college planning, and a college testing program. So that's a fantastic curriculum. Clearly money matters. In Jericho, they have a number of programs actually enhance students' career opportunities. They have programs in fashion design, advertising design, marketing, entrepreneurship, business law, civil engineering, and sports medicine. These are actually preparing students for the job market. These kinds of programs, while not every district can afford this degree of quality, clearly cuts in career programs, cuts in advanced placement, cuts in arts, narrowing of the curriculum by cutting electives is cutting back the quality of education. This is evidence that the high quality curriculum, the access to everything, the programs that keep students engaged and interested in learning work. So again, you go through, most of the rest of the report is the things we've already highlighted with the graphs. The last, at the end, it does remind people that the history of the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, which is the lawsuit that was initiated in 1993. It goes through the history of that, and that's on page 9 of the report. The state in 2007, after multiple rounds of going through every level of the courts, the state finally made a commitment to increase classroom funding or foundation aid by $5.5 billion over 4 years, with the distribution very similar to what the Regents had proposed, very similar to what you would get if you took the competitive grants out of and put it back into the classroom, with 72% of that money going to high needs districts, 22% of that money going to average need districts. So very similar to what we're advocating here today. But that money has not made it into the classrooms. We saw 2 years of the funding. It's all been taken back in the last 2 years. And that promise has been broken at this point in time. So it's not been fulfilled anyways. So that's the report that we have here. I'm going to, just one last thing to draw your attention to, then we'll hear from our speakers. On the right-hand side of the package is for every single school district in the state. And the first one here is the Capital District. They're all organized by regions, and then within that by county. For every single school district in the state, you can see the columns. You can see that, I'll just take Cohoes as an example. Cohoes, in the last 2 years, they lost almost $2.5 million in state school aid. This does not include building aid, because building aid fluctuates a lot based on building projects. None of these numbers include the building aid. The executive budget would restore about $500,000 out of that funding. But if the competitive grant funds were reprogrammed, they'd get another $222,000 on top of that. So for every single district in the state, you can see we've done that calculation of if you just took that money and put it back through the governor's classroom aid formula, what everyone in the state would get. Students want to learn, they want to succeed, they want to have those things that they need for college. Maya Williams.
Hello. As Billy just said, my name is Maya Williams, and I'm a senior from Schenectady High School. I am basically here today to say that the $250 million allocated to competitive funding is too much, and some or most of that needs to be allocated to high needs districts. As a student from Schenectady High School, a high needs district, I know just how much this funding is needed. This year, I've seen my class sizes jump to, I think my biggest class is 32 kids. In 10th grade, I had a chemistry class with 7 kids. 7 to 32. It's a big jump. And I think that the governor has an idea that these cuts don't hurt kids, and they do. And just because I'm a senior and I'm about to leave high school doesn't mean that I don't care, because I try to speak as a voice for all students, not in New York, but as of right now, yes. Because $250 million in competitive funding is too much, and it's not okay that he's pitting me against my friends in other districts.
Who is he?
The governor.
No,
Not being explicit, I'm sorry. Like I said, as a member of a high needs school district, the cuts do hurt my district, and I know that my class sizes have jumped. We are always in need of textbooks and other things, and it's just difficult to cope when he keeps taking money away. As he says, the cuts don't hurt, but they do. And the Regents proposed that $53 million is allocated to pre-K funding. As a former pre-K student, I do know that pre-K increases graduation rates. Of everyone in my pre-K class that I can think of, I know it's only 18 kids, but all of us are graduating high school this year, and all of us are college bound. I know it's just one example, but that example multiplies in every pre-K class. And for me, it was a great learning experience, and I think that it's necessary for kids across the state, and it's the governor's job to give us a quality education and a chance to succeed among the rest of the country. Thank you.
My name's Miriam Aristifarr, and I'm a parent of a second grader at PS 153 in West Harlem, New York, District 6, which actually initiated the campaign for physical equity, and we're still drowning. I came here to represent the parents and children from approximately 36 schools in northern Manhattan, which I'm realizing is the forgotten half of Manhattan. Our district has lost $14 million in 2 years. Just 10 blocks from me, a school has lost 10 school employees in 1 year, and enrollment has not declined. My school lost 2 school aides, and if a teacher passes away or retires, that seat is not filled. We just keep moving and make do with what we have. Our schools are less than 3 miles from some of the leading institutions of culture in the world. Yet our children aren't being given the opportunity to learn the arts. My son is in an arts program with no art teacher. This is, I mean, you would think art, no art teacher. So I have a background in art, and I'm the new volunteer art teacher. This is not sustainable. His school has actually lost approximately $5 million in 4 years. And this is a school that serves 1,100 children. We're in a high needs area, a lot of English language learners, and it's not working. Whatever is being done is not working, and we need money restored. Again, as I stated, this meant when the art teacher retired, so did arts for the children of that school. And this is an alarming scenario that's repeating in our entire state, I believe. I'm a communications designer by trade. I started out as an artistic dreamer. I failed math my entire life, but I was very good at drawing and art. Anything you gave me, I drew. I was also a product of the public schools in the 70s when we had our last recession. I had arts, I had music, I had an art club, I had everything that is being cut back in this recession, and I asked why. My dream of being an artist was nurtured and remained alive, even when times were tough. I went on to college, which, by the way, I'm still paying for my student loans, and I'm 42 years old, but I graduated cum laude from the prestigious Parsons School of Design. I'm the daughter of immigrants, so the dream was kept alive by our lawmakers in the 70s. I went on to lead creative teams for major corporations in New York City. You've probably used some of the products I've designed. The legislatures, when I was a child, did not cut my dreams or make my school compete for money, which is what they're asking them to do today. They knew their job was to ensure that children had the right to dream and go on to college. They knew that they had to give every child in New York State the right to that dream, to succeed wherever that dream took them. This very building is filled with children's art, yet I continue to see policies that do not support the arts in our schools, especially these cuts. Art's becoming the privilege of a few. As a parent and an artist, I am doing my part. I question if the legislators in place right now are doing their part to allow children to keep dreaming. I ask that these policies start to change and restore the money, and we shouldn't have to compete for them by county, by district, by state. It's not right. And that's all.
Now, the next speaker is Cecilia Kachik. Cecilia is the president of the Duanesburg School Board in Schenectady County. We've heard from a student from a small city. We've heard from a parent from a large city. Our rural schools, both our average need and our high need rural schools, have been paying a tremendous price in the last 2 years as well. And we asked Cecilia to come and talk about some of the experiences in Duanesburg.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'm a parent of a 7th grader, and that's really why I'm here, because I'm seeing what opportunities he's going to potentially not have if the trajectory of the revenues continue to decrease and our expenses continue to increase. We're a small school in a rural area in Schenectady County. We have 850 kids. Our budget is about $14 million. We're looking at a deficit in next year's budget of about $1 million. If we wanted to eliminate that deficit, we would have to look at eliminating our non-mandated activities or our non-mandated programs. That means kindergarten. That means all sports, AP classes, things that we are not mandated to provide in our school. Those are really important educational program activities that help our kids succeed. About 3 years ago, we only had half-day kindergarten. We worked to create all-day kindergarten, and it made a huge difference. I remember our first grade teachers coming to the board meeting and saying, it made a huge difference. We're 6 months ahead of where we would have been if we didn't have all-day kindergarten. We're potentially facing elimination of things like kindergarten that are so important to helping get kids ready to learn. And I know that there are other school districts like Duanesburg out there that are facing the same types of difficult decisions. I think we've heard that we need to make smart decisions with our limited resources. And the reason why I'm here is to advocate that it would be smart to take the performance grant money and reprogram it and get it to school districts so that we don't have to make difficult decisions such as that. This is something that's important for all school districts, not just ours. So I would encourage the governor and the legislature to take a look at that pool of funding and reprogram it, because it will make a difference in our ability to maintain our good program. We consider ourselves a successful school. We have a great program. We're very proud of that. But that program is going to start to go downward because we can't provide what we need to give these kids a sound educational program.
Next is Yvette Alfonso, who's the president of the Citizen Action of New York. Yvette?
Hi, good afternoon. Citizen Action is a grassroots statewide organization which has been involved very, very heavily in the whole campaign for fiscal equity and for restoration of education funding. But in addition to being president of Citizen Action statewide, I'm also the mother of a kindergartner and have been in the field of early childhood education for over 30 years. One of the things I can say is that in terms of my own particular personal narrative, my daughter, who's now in kindergarten, did have access to quality childcare. She did have access to a quality universal pre-K program. And now in kindergarten, she's actually beginning to read on the second grade level. This is not by accident. This is because teachers nurtured her. Yes, we nurtured her at home and continue to do so also. But she was exposed to so much in those early years. And even though there's many, many more years of education that she's going to be involved in, I have no doubt that it's going to make a positive impact in her life. Now, I'm very happy that she had that experience and that she's going to continue to have experience receiving a quality education. But I also know that if it's not available to children from all across the spectrum of our society, we are really, really in big trouble. As an early childhood educator, I actually run a child development center in South Troy, and I see what happens as our children come in and as we start working with them. And it really, really makes a positive difference when you have access to children at a very young age to be able to help and mold them and give them that thirst for learning, and also to work with their families so that they see the importance of that learning and the discipline and what they should be doing at home. You know, parenting doesn't come normally. I mean, not normally, but you know, it's something you have to learn on the job. And I think early childhood, in fact, I know early childhood education programs, including pre-kindergarten programs, help parents be able to get on that road to to help their children to academic success. It does make a difference, and we really need to continue those programs. Let's stop cannibalizing each other through competitions and really support what is worthwhile.
Our next speaker, you know, there's been a lot of talk about feeding the education bureaucracy. In reality, what we're hearing about is that these are cuts to the classroom, cuts for students. And you know, sort of mythology about an education bureaucracy. Our next speaker is a school board member. This is a work of love to be a school board member. This is a volunteer activity, a service to a community. You know, a lot of work. Dan Egan's the president of the Albany School Board. Dan?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the chance to speak today. You know, Mr. Easton mentioned the Republican presidential debates earlier, and based on what I've just heard from my comrades here, I think any one of them would make a better presidential candidate than the ones we're hearing from. So
We have to wait a few years for Maya, but she'll get there.
you know what? It's probably worth the wait. It's probably worth the wait. I want to talk about the Constitution for a minute. We're at war, and we ask our young soldiers to take an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. So I'm a guy who takes oaths and constitutions pretty seriously. Anybody who's elected to office in the state of New York takes an oath to support the Constitution of the state of New York. And that Constitution requires that the state provide a sound basic education to all. And the courts have ruled that a lack of money is not sufficient reason to fail to fulfill that obligation. They have to do it whether they can afford it or not. You have to find a way at the state level. So I think one of the questions before us today is the state providing the resources required to fulfill their constitutional requirements? And I'll come back to that at the end. I want to talk a little bit about Albany. Albany's got about 10,500 students. About 70% of them are eligible for free and reduced price lunch. We've got hundreds of English language learners, so we're a very high needs district. And I was so happy a week or two ago when I saw that the governor had restored $805 million in school aid. I thought, great, we're going to get something. But of course, the devil's always in the details, and the details are that in Albany, when the governor adds $805 million to the budget, we experience a net loss of $1.4 million. I don't know how much he has to add for us to get a positive number, but right now we're in the red. We only get about 35% of our school budget from the state, which is much less than a lot of upstate cities, yet we outperform a lot of upstate cities. So we're already doing more with less. Which kind of brings me to two things I'd like to talk about. I think there's two myths out there about schools that kind of cause people to pause and think about whether we really want to spend more on education. I think those two myths are, one, that there's some kind of big education bureaucracy, as was mentioned before, that somehow we're very wasteful. And the other is that teachers' unions are causing the problem. So I'd like to talk about both of those, if I may. So a lot of people think public schools somehow are badly managed or inefficient. So I can't speak for every district. I can tell you that in Albany, our enrollment has increased in the last couple of years. We've had about a 5% increase in our student population, which is really unheard of in urban districts. Yet over the last 4 years, we've lost over $11 million in state aid. We're doing more with less. Many of the costs that keep rising are completely outside our control. Just for example, pensions and health care together. Over the last 14 years, the cost of pensions and health care has tripled. There's nothing as a school board that we can do about that. In Albany, the cost of charter schools has gone from 0 to about $36 million annually. Our estimation this year is that we will spend $36 million on charter school tuition. Albany taxpayers over the last decade have spent over $160 million on taxpayer-supported charter schools without any choice in the matter. Last year, when everyone else in the state was tightening their belts, charter schools got a 20% windfall increase in their revenue. In Albany, that translated to a $5 million gift to the charter industry. I haven't heard of how the students benefited from that. The highest paid school administrators in the city of Albany work for charter schools, not for public schools. Despite all of this, we're managing our schools as best we can. And I'm proud to report that last year we didn't lay off a single teacher. However, over the last 4 years, during these cuts, we've eliminated over 250 jobs. A lot of those were teachers and teachers' aides. We've sold several buildings. We've cut our administrative staffing costs 23%. However, along the way, we've greatly increased our class sizes, as you heard. We now have close to 30 students in a lot of our class sections. That's despite decades of research that shows that small class sizes are a critical success factor in education. We've dropped most of our elementary foreign language classes, despite decades of research that show that children learn languages best in their early years. I don't know when all of you all learned language, but I was 2 or 3 years old. That's when the brain is primed to learn language, and yet we're taking it away from young children. We closed our alternative school. We've drained our reserve funds to dangerous levels, which ensures future tax increases. We've cut our nurses, our guidance counselors, and our librarians. We're now looking at not buying any textbooks this year. You talk about doing more with less, you might as well ask firefighters not to use any water this year. The The second myth I want to talk about is teachers' unions. Somehow people believe that that's contributing to our problem, and that to me is kind of like blaming cops for crime. Anybody who thinks they're going to improve education while at the same time demonizing teachers needs to go back to school. In Albany, we're working in partnership with all of our unions. Our teachers and administrators all agreed to a one-year pay freeze. Our teachers proposed a 5-day extension of the school year. Let me just say that again. Our lazy teachers are so apathetic about their students that they agreed to lengthen the school year while freezing their own pay. And we went ahead and did that. Despite what you may have heard, our teachers have led the way in adopting a new evaluation system. So to sum up, in Albany, I think the locally elected school board has done a pretty good job managing this crisis of the last few years, in close partnership with all of our staff and our unions. We're not looking for a handout. We're looking for the state to do the right thing. Our staff have stepped up and done their part. The board has done its job. Our citizens have done their part. Now it's time for the state to do its constitutional duty and provide an adequate level of funding for all our students. Thank you.
And our last speaker is a parent from Troy School 16, Emily Pena. Emily?
Hello, everyone. I'm here to ask a couple questions. I wanted to know, why is it that our children are hurting here the most? I wanted to know, why is it that elected officials that have been chosen to represent us do not help us now? Who can we depend on to give our children the bare essentials they need to have the best public education experience this state has to offer? Why are we depriving our children of this full experience? This has become a pattern. It seems that when things need to be cut, the first to go is the children's education. The only thing left for us parents to do is bandage these cuts by fundraising to make the best out of the worst situations. I cannot understand, why is it so hard to choose education over anything else? 2 of my children go to School 16 in Troy. We have a pool facility that can't even be used due to budget cuts. Also, School 12 closed down, making classes overcrowded for other schools. You can call me a statistic because I am a single mother with 3 children, trying to survive in a society where our government goes through power struggles. But I'd rather not my children be a statistic. Education should be our first priority, not our last. We all need to remember these children are our future, and they are your future voters. Someone please bring the money back to education.
I think we've gone through everything. Again, our demands out of this report are that we need to do better than restoring 1 out of 4 dollars that have been cut from the classrooms over the last 2 years. That even to get to 1 out of 4, we need to reprogram the competitive grants, put them into effective programs, the exact kinds of programs that are working or were working and have been cut. So we need to reprogram the $250 million, but we need to do more than that. And we need to prioritize the highest need districts as well as average need districts. And we need to also set aside some funding to get us back on track, both on the campaign for fiscal equity, but also on our promise on